The famous war of Gog and Magog, spoken of in the book of Ezekiel. We talked about being on the road to the mark of the beast. Are we also on the road to the war of Gog and Magog? This prophecy is scheduled to come in the latter days, at a time when Israel is gathered from the nations, and it happens in relation to an army which comes from the direction of the north, led by great power to the uttermost parts of the north, and one of the countries which is involved in it is Persia, along with some other countries. So what about it? Are we on the way to it? I think there are numerous prophecies in the Bible which point to the end time scenario around Israel. Tell us that when the Lord shall build up Zion, he shall appear in his glory. So when you see the restoration of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, you see Zion being built up, it's a sign that Jesus is about to come. The Lord is going to appear in his glory. That passage we just read from Ezekiel 38 speaks about a war of Gog and Magog in which an army comes from the north against Israel and is defeated by the Lord when he acts in judgment against it and saves Israel from destruction. We also read in Zechariah about the time when Jerusalem will be a burdensome stone burdening all nations, a center of world attention, and it will lead to armies coming against Jerusalem at the very end of days, and which will lead to the return of the Messiah, when he will stand on the Mount of Olives and set up his messianic kingdom. And Jesus himself spoke about Jerusalem being trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Also spoke about the fig tree budding, fig tree as a sign of Israel's restoration as a nation before his second coming. So we see a lot of things which in the Bible point us to this part of the world as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy and a sign of the second coming of Jesus the Messiah. Now, I said this week is Purim, and the Purim festival, celebrated each year, recounts the biblical story of Esther, the beautiful Jewish maiden who married King Ahasuerus, told by her uncle Mordecai to keep her identity secret, and how the evil Haman, the advisor to the king of Persia, persuaded the king to kill all the Jews in the province of Persia, kingdom of Persia. In other words, an act of genocide against the Jewish people. Did that because Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. Esther was told to fast and pray, and she went into the king and set in motion the plan to rescue the Jews, which ended up putting Haman on the gallows he directed for Mordecai. So he turned the tables on Haman, the evil advisor, and saved the Jews from destruction. Celebrated year by year by the Jewish people as deliverance from their enemies, particularly from Haman, who is described in the Bible as being the Agagite. The Agagite is actually a descendant from Amalek, and Amalek is the sort of traditional enemy of Israel, which appears in every generation. And it speaks about a perpetual struggle between the enemies of Israel and Israel itself. And we see the spirit of Amalek behind Hitler, Hamas, and also behind the Islamic Republic of Persia, Iran. And modern Israel sees a certain parallel with what's happening now with this story of Esther. On Tuesday last, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a declaration saying that Israel will not permit Iran to arm itself with nuclear weapons to fulfill its oft-repeated goal of destroying Israel. And he said, quote, "On the eve of the festival of Purim, I'd like to say to those who seek our lives, Iran and its proxies in the Middle East, 2,500 years ago, another Persian villain, Haman, tried to destroy the Jewish people, and just as he failed then, so too you would fail today. We will not allow your extremist and aggressive regime to attain nuclear weapons. We have not made the journey of generations of thousands of years to return to the land of Israel in order to allow the delusional regime of the Ayatollahs to end the story of the revival of the Jewish people." So on the eve of Purim, Netanyahu made this statement. It also showed that he has no faith in agreements in the Iran nuclear deal. He was giving a word particularly to President Biden of the United States and the European Union not to re-engage with Iran and try and revive the deal which they made on sanctions against Iran many years ago, which Trump actually pulled out of. And another significance of Trump being out of the way is now that they're pushing the way to revive this agreement with Iran, which is heating up at this present time.